All right, welcome everybody to the RSP Film Room, and today I am joined by our special guest, Mr. Kyle Krabs. Kyle of NDT Scouting, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Matt. It was really fun hopping on last year. I know we did tight end Max Williams, which was very fun, so I'm looking forward to dipping my toe into the pool on the other end of things, doing some defense in tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And your choice tonight was, I don't know if I pronounced his first name right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Kamalei?
I believe it's Kamalei.
Kamalei Correa, who is a Boise State edge rusher, 6'3", 243-ish, depending on what DB's measurements are compared to what we have recently updated at workouts. Tell us a little bit about why you chose Mr. Correa here.
He was somebody that when I saw his name come across as an early declare for the draft, it was kind of curious because he wasn't somebody that was on my radar. And in the process of doing my film evaluations, I usually start at the top and work my way down. So I didn't get a chance to get around to him until I believe it was the end of January. And I watched the games that were available, and I did some extra digging for some extra games. And holy cow, he's just violent. He's a violent football player. He's high motor nonstop. Does not have a lot of opportunities for you to catch your breath when you watch him play because he's very active along the front. He's a little bit more explosive, I think, than what his jump suggested at the combine. I know his vert was 33 or 33 and a half, and his broad jump was only 9 feet on the dot. But you watch him play it, and he's winning off the edge. He's winning from the second level, getting on top of guys quickly. So just a lot of versatility there that I think teams could have some fun with.
Well, this sounds great. It definitely sounds like a good thing that if you're up late and watching this with us tonight, then you will get a chance to I think this one will keep you awake then. So this will be a good one to be able to check out. So in speaking of things that won't keep you awake, but we need to read out, is to let everybody know that the videos posted here at the RSP Film Room are not hosted on this server, and that the original video content is not considered to be the property of the RSP Film Room. The videos are considered to be used under the Fair Use Doctrine of the United States Copyright Law, Title 17, U.S. Code Sections 107 through 118, and the videos are used on the site for editorial and educational purposes only, and the RSP Film Room and its staff don't coin ownership of any original video content. The RSP Film Room and its staff don't say any of the video clips in the advertisements, marketing, or anything else is used for financial gain. None of that kind of thing. And all the video content in each clip is considered to be owned by the individual broadcast companies. So yeah, we got the three of us here who are going to be watching film today. My daughter's cat, who we're cat sitting right now, and Mr. Kyle Krabs and myself. So we are going to start off with, as suggested, the Northern Illinois game. Make sure that we get everything set up here on the up and up, and we will get this thing rolling. If you are new to this, just want to let everybody know that Draft Breakdown does just a phenomenal job of providing this material for us to view. You can go to www.draftbreakdown.com to be able to find this material, and for pretty much any position. And you can find a lot of Kyle's work there as well. He does a great job over there, as well as folks like Jeff Risdom and Brian Perez, and a whole list of people that I would highly recommend and hope to have on this show at some point down the line. So with that in mind, Kyle, we good to go? Does this look good to you?
Looks good to me. All clear.
Okay, sweet. All right, I'm going to start it off in half speed because that seems to be the speed of choice for most folks when we try to watch these.
Right.
And then if we need to speed it up, we'll speed it up. But all right, let's get started here. We got our gentleman over here, it looks like, or no, wait a minute.
I believe he's down at the bottom here.
At the bottom, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
So I think just kind of off the bat, the interesting thing that kind of came up, not necessarily to do with this play per se, but somebody made the comparison of Clay Matthews which I don't see. But I think it was the kickback that really came from that comparison um, was pretty violent. But speaking of violent, that's one of the things that I do see in common between the two players. But he's nowhere near as twitched up as Clay is. Um, runs pretty well, but I'm interested from your perspective, Matt. Like, what do you put into comparisons in general, particularly at this time of year?
I'm kind of more of a style. That's a great question. I'm more of a stylistic comparison type of guy, and it's just more of a way to develop some sort of a shorthand that gives readers, listeners, an opportunity to just evoke some sort of imagery that gives them an idea of either. You got to give it context though, so it's got to be the comparison either has to be a height, weight, dimension, athletic context, or it has to be a style of play context. And it can be a combination of those things. And if I tend to like to compare players on like a spectrum, so that I can have maybe 3 to 5 players on that spectrum, and say, if you look at these players, their styles are actually very similar. But if you add the athletic component, then player A is going to be over on, the far end of the high end. Player B is going to be in the middle. Player C is going to be in like the borderline starter backup end. And player D is going to be a reserve who some of you who are diehard fans or folks like us have heard of. So I do stuff like that. That's kind of where I'm at. How about you?
I generally, I feel like if they're going to, a comparison's going to come to me, it's going to be, since I started doing the work with NDT in 2013, that seems to be, once the really thorough, like if I've conducted a college evaluation on a player, that's when, I'm able to connect dots. And something with Correa, there are times where he reminds me of Carl Bradford from Arizona State. And that can be considered a kiss of death if you look at what Bradford's done to this point. But the college film of Bradford, in which used as a rush player, capable of being out in space a little bit. I know he's done off-ball work with Green Bay. Just the violence in which he plays. There's just flashes, like certain reps where it's like, yeah, you can see that comparison to a guy. And sometimes if you're really high on a player, like I was with Bradford, I really like Bradford, relatively speaking, then, those are the times that I find that there's a comparison that comes up. But I'm not trying to, put square pegs in round holes and come up with a comparison for anybody. If it comes to me, it comes to me. But I'm not really big on comparisons in general.
Right. And I think that's an interesting way of being able to put it. And I like the example you brought of Carl Bradford from the standpoint of I'm working on quarterbacks right now for the RSP. And there's some players that I put in my spectrum with Nate Davis. And if anyone who is just a casual fan, you probably heard of Nate Davis as the guy who looked like he might have had an opportunity in San Francisco, and now he's playing in the Arena League, and you're never going to hear about him again unless you're an Arena League fan. But what you may not know is that Bill Polian actually brought Nate Davis in during the year that Peyton Manning got hurt and was going to have his surgery. And the strategy the hope was that Bill Polian actually had a first round grade on Nate Davis in terms of ability, really high on Nate Davis. But Davis didn't have the professional attitude and approach to being the type of player that his physical abilities and on field, just kind of general savvy about playing the quarterback position. He didn't have the work ethic. If he had Peyton, let's just put it this way. If he had Peyton Manning's approach to the game,
right,
Nate Davis might be the best quarterback in the NFL. I mean, in terms of just physical ability matched with that kind of brain and work ethic. But a lot of quarterbacks he probably could have said that about. But Davis really was a good player. And, so a lot of people who may be in a scouting circle might look at it and go, okay, I kind of get that. a casual fan might look at it and go, Nate Davis, he isn't any good. Why are you, but you're putting this guy, he's ranked 5th on your board, but you're, and saying he has a chance to be a starter. And Nate Davis is one of those comparisons. And that's one of the things that you have to, sometimes that's the thing about comparisons, is that it's not for everybody. Sometimes it's a shorthand for people who are really diehard fans. So I agree with you. To me, it's more of a semi shorthand entertainment look into my brain, and you may not want to look there. So that's that's kind of the way it's my warning to you. It's kind of like going to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. You might fall into you might fall into one of those trap doors and never be seen again as the Oompa Loompas start singing. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get back to our Mr. Correa here. And I mean, you see the early hands, and certainly I like the ability to move bodies, at least with the strength that he's showing and the ability to push.
Yeah, he kind of gets his initial angle, seeing that there's jet motion and that tight end taking that lateral step right away. He kind of walls himself in here and sells himself short.
Yeah.
With him being walked up on the line with an outside shade, he should be able to match step for step here and keep the outside arm free.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's functional strength here to collapse, and at least he reset the line of scrimmage and forced this to bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
And work out with width.
And so what that gives you, and I think obviously you make a great point from a strategic mental angle of the game. The physical, you're seeing a demonstration of physical skill and some basic things that are very that can be somewhat helpful in a certain situation. But in this situation, as you described, if he was working more towards the outside, had the outside arm free, then you're talking about a savvy player who's understanding what his role is and what he's able to do to be able to stop this play, as opposed to just being someone who's getting a push.
And one thing that I will look for, because, I mean, this is really early on the initial drive of the game, is, if he gets another opportunity where they come at him laterally again, how does he adjust?
Right.
So maybe he just kind of got caught off guard. See, that time he fights through contact and stretches this to the closed side of the field. You could see him do a nice job of turning that shoulder for leverage, and then fighting back across, cuts back inside, back into pursuit. So that's a little bit cleaner, even though the separation and the length is not as established as it was on the first snap.
Yeah.
But again, he's playing on the correct side of the line of scrimmage. He's got push. He's getting width. All things that you like to see. It's just not a clean disengage to be able to try and challenge the ball carrier in the alley.
Right. So when you're looking at edge players of this sort, what are some of the things that you're looking for, Kyle?
Particularly from a 2, I'm looking for something like that with a little bit of a dynamic base. You can see as he kind of turns the corner on the tackle here, he's able to produce some lean. The inside shoulder stays down, and he's able to, if you want to pause it right, we'll let this roll and try and catch it.
Yeah. Right about here.
Right about here. You can see that inside arm is coming up through. He's coming from a 2-point stance. So he doesn't quite have the luxury of having as much weight forward. So it's a little more challenging for you to get hip to hip early in your snap unless you have a really strong first step. But this ability to get your tackle hinged from a wider angle early on, and then you being able to tightly turn this corner and not bubble yourself any further back than, say, to 43, which is where he's at right about now. So ideally, he's able to hug this really tight and just kind of turn. Didn't look like he got his hand firmly set on the outside shoulder of the tackle here. You'd like to see a little bit of extension there to ride that out. But the big thing is angles. You're looking for a baseline level of athleticism to be a stand-up two-point player, how you play with angles, and then, of course, you know, your ability to bend in your hand technique is also very important to play off of established blocks. So those are kind of some of the primary things that my eyes tend to gravitate towards and look for first.
Great. Yeah, and I mean, when you took, you know, we don't get a chance to see it from that last play, and we'll need to look at it a little bit more. But if you can give us a little foreshadowing, what kind of bend in terms of like hip and ankle flexion do you think Mr. Correa has here when it comes to being able to turn a corner? Because it was hidden by the scoreboard on the last play here.
Yeah, I think he produces a very, not necessarily Vic Beasley levels of bend, but he's certainly not stiff. And you'll see on a couple of occasions where his short area adjustments, the phrase that I keep coming back to and find myself using a lot this year is the dynamic base. Like, if your hips have to stay aligned underneath or over top of your feet as you're trying to turn and corner and carry momentum and those sorts of things, that's when you start seeing that a player is a bit stiff. So he's able to play with his feet out from underneath his hips. And this is a really nice job here on the boundary, playing the run here.
Yeah, he does a good job transitioning from one defender to another, or one lineman to the runner.
And there's that clean disengage we didn't see from him a little earlier in the game. The outside arm's free. And he's got enough lateral ability where he can hinge those hips a little bit and get that width pretty quickly and transition out.
And he's able to, you know, you see the strength there when you're able to knock a man back a step.
Yeah.
And you see the man's, like, literally his feet lift up off the ground, and you can tell that it's not on his own volition, right? About here.
Yep, he's got the backbone and everything.
Yeah. And that step was involuntary that we just saw move back there. He recreated the line of scrimmage and was able to shed off of that. Now, some people may ask, okay, he's doing this against a tackle at Northern Illinois. What do you look at in terms of projecting when you're watching an edge rusher defend the run? What are some of the things that you're looking for that help you kind of reconcile that he may not be facing NFL competition here?
Sure, and I don't think this offensive tackle is NFL competition, but at the same time, it's a 290-plus pound human being. So, to some degree, there's a baseline level of strength that has to be present, but it kind of comes down to you're looking for things that a player is able to execute in real time that you would imagine that they're practicing on the practice field. So you're looking for advanced techniques in hand shedding and extending plays or extending arms and separating and keeping your chest clean and those sorts of things. And then as you develop into the game film, this was one of the first games I watched of him. And then you're looking for, going forward against different competition, how consistent are you in implementing those things? So this is kind of like the initial baseline impression that you set. And then from there, as you get deeper into the film, you're able to say, okay, this may have been a specific case where he's just really weak offensive tackle. Or if you're seeing it consistently, it makes you a little bit more comfortable with what you're projecting.
Yeah. So what about his hands here? Because on this particular play, you know, when I'm watching it, I'm seeing him trying to strike and I don't know if he's choosing a side. I wouldn't mind seeing him choose a side rather than, it looks like he's kind of head on here. I may not see that correctly, but it kind of, I like that he's trying to use his hands here. He just missed in this particular instance, which, you know, happens.
Yeah, he likes to they like to use him in stunts quite a bit. So you'll see him kind of duck up inside pretty frequently, and he has some success there when he's able to land the first strike. He's not there yet as far as that second recovery strike, but his hands are really powerful and they're really violent. So there's sometimes where if the ball's held long enough, he's able to get back into the play.
Makes sense. He's just got to learn, like if we're going to use boxers as an example, he looks like he's good at throwing the big roundhouse, but he has to learn how to be more precise with his jabs and his uppercuts and slipping punches and being able to be more precise with the punches he throws rather than hoping he throws a knockout blow every time.
Right.
Let's put it right over here. Okay. I mean, in essence, he's doing his job on that.
Yeah, and I'm liking the fact that I'm seeing him more consistently now, at least on an open formation of this side where there's not a tight end there. He's consistently turning that tackle about 30 degrees in, and he's done it again where he's boxing in, and the line of scrimmage is closed. So if the interior gaps are sealed and that back looks to bounce, there's nowhere to go.
Right. And that's an example of what happens when you do your job.
Yep.
Let the play come to you sometimes.
And that is a good example there of, there's been some interesting discussion about, arm length over this winter and how important it is, and if it's the be-all, end-all, and how one arm is longer than two. And you get a good snapshot of that here where he has the outside arm not necessarily engaged, but he's got the hips dropped. He's in a power position with the knees bent, and that inside arm is locked right about.
I'll do one more time.
Yeah. Right about here. You can see the outside arm is clear, but he's in a very strong position. You can see where his base is right over top of his heels. He's not rolling forward on his toes. Sometimes if you're seeing somebody who's a little lighter with, either their functional power or they're lighter in the trunk, they're a smaller player, they'll really throw that torso forward and try and get backwards push. But he's able to lock this out with a firm arm upright in a power position, and it really manifests. His chest is clean. There's nowhere to go, and it's only one arm. So I think that's a good illustration of, some of the talking points that have been had over the last couple of years among some of our colleagues in regards to the importance of arm length and where it's applicable and where it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that we often see with really athletic players who are not disciplined is not playing their role.
Right.
Guys who try to freelance so much that they're trying to make the play and they end up giving up, either going inside and trying to shoot through and giving up the outside lane, or trying to work all the way around to the point that they still open up a gap inside of them.
And can you run that back one more time?
Yeah.
This is actually kind of looking at it again, right about once we get locked out, right about here. If you watch his left arm, he actually does a nice job of attacking at the wrist here. So he actually will take that left arm, put it on the right wrist, and kind of wall it off and press through right there.
Yeah.
To get the hands off. So that's a nice subtle example. It's one of the things that we talked about earlier of precision with your hands, not necessarily throwing haymakers.
If you will, tell folks about some of the things that you can realistically expect a defensive coach to work with when it comes to their hands, and how much of it is a player in his own right doing the work outside of the NFL in general. Because I think a lot of people, I see a lot of people always say, well, he'll get coached up in the
Right.
NFL. And
Right.
then there's a lot of, you talk to a lot of players and they go, well, yeah, in scheme I will, but I either need to consult a veteran or find a consultant or do some work on my own to really develop these kinds of things. So talk to some of that about, from your experience, what you see these guys being able to, how they're going to learn these things.
Well, I think the immediate example that comes to my mind is Haoli Kikaha from last year from Washington. Was a pass rusher, ended up going to the Saints and had a fairly successful rookie year. Um, and he was renowned for his judo background. And that was something that, he had established outside of football. And a lot of that translated fairly quickly. And a lot of that really comes down to what we just saw here. Attacking at anatomical weak points is one of the phrases that I think is easiest for people to understand. If you're attacking somebody at the wrist or the elbow with your hands, something like that, you're able to break the arm in a sense of a locked arm is stronger than a bent arm. So uh, a lot of this, you're looking for somebody, especially if you're looking for somebody that's going to translate quickly. You're looking for somebody that has flashes like this, per se, in their college film, because everybody practices, your rips, your spins, your swims, your arm lifts, which is where you place the arm on the wrist and actually lift the arm up, and you can generate a high amount of torso torque and rotation with a counter like that. And you practice it all the time. But until you see somebody who's actively implementing it in the game, you can't give them credit for it because they know the concepts. It's just if the light bulb goes off and you're able to actively implement against live competition.
Great points. Great points. And it's interesting to me. I mean, a guy I know that I came across who studies Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is Tom Bahali.
Yeah,
He's rolling around with the Gracies.
yeah.
So it's, that's the type of thing that over time, these professional athletes are looking at cross-training situations to be able to develop their game and apply new concepts to their current profession.
Well, and it's so much less wear and tear, but it's still functional training. I think you see LaCharles Bentley doing a lot of great functional training on the offensive line side of the ball. And Chuck Smith, you see quite a bit doing for pass rushers and defensive ends, functional training. But something, in the offseason, once you're an established professional, something like jiu-jitsu is very appealing for the fact that, from my point of view, in my perspective, that it's low impact, relatively speaking, compared to putting pads on and physically ramming your body into another human being. Jiu-jitsu is not about overpowering your opponent. It's about precision and finesse and hand-eye coordination and those sorts of things.
I guess I'll say the one we don't get to really see him turn the corner on this particular play because of where the play comes in. But I do like the impact of the hit to be able to knock the ball loose.
Yes, yeah. This is one of those the stereotypical high motor plays. I know Carl Nassib had quite a few of these this year from Penn State. Quarterback takes a deep drop. You're able to get around the corner. The ball's held a little too long, and he's sitting right there for you. So if you're looking at the pass set from the tackle, you can see Correa's first step has him hinged really early in the pass set. So this offensive tackle is, 3 yards into his kick slide, and he's already perpendicular to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
So he's bailing out, and you can see Correa is hip to hip with him. So it's not necessarily like it was just a bad pass set. It's a really aggressive first step. He's hip to hip within 2 or 3 yards. And you can see some torso mobility here, not maybe necessarily, although you see some ankle flexion right here on the screen.
Yeah.
To really stick that foot in the ground. But also torso mobility for me is a really big thing to be able to, can you keep the hips along the rush track and stay consistent with your steps, but can you rotate the shoulders and make yourself smaller? This offensive tackle right here, he has nothing to punch because of how Correa is able to turn the shoulders. He's diminishing his surface area. So you see the tackle try and get the left hand up on the 8, and he really just has no leverage, so Correa runs right through it.
That's a great point. And it's fun because you look at this and you see it's kind of a ragged rush from him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can see the positives of what he's doing there.
And a subtle little hand tuck there at the very end again. If you let it run just a little bit further, you see the right hand, he's going to put it on the left wrist and just knock it right down.
Right there.
Yep.
Very nice.
So it's just not as tight of an angle as you'd like to see. But there's flashes of some of the things that we've talked about all being applied in real time here.
Yeah, and I just love this consistent theme is we're watching him use his hands in multiple ways that are just really nice positives to his game that he's going to be able to build on. He has an awareness of how to use his hands in a given situation.
Right. So it's one of those things where I feel like he's really settled into the game because he had some poor reps early on. He was throwing haymakers heavy early. He was getting caught inside. But you're seeing now that we're into, the middle of the game in the second quarter, there's some of these subtleties starting to come out. He's felt out his opponent. So this is where you really have an opportunity to see, players once they understand who they're facing. It's a little bit different watching it on film versus experiencing for the first couple of reps.
Yeah.
And this is a nice job to squeeze here.
Yeah.
He doesn't get too far as depth and run himself out of the play and concede the corner. He kind of puts the brakes on right here. And I'd like to see him a little bit more square to the line of scrimmage. But once he's gotten the depth that he gets and decides he needs to pin, he pins 35 fairly well so that hole is squeezed and that back has nowhere to cut out into the boundary.
Right. The back is basically pushed into the supporting defender.
Yeah.
Once again, a little initial force there.
And he is talking smack after every play right now. You can see him jawing off. It was one of the things that I wrote down when I first watched this game is like he loves to talk. He loves to hit. He loves to – if he gets a skill player, he'll go out of his way to kind of put him in his place, so to say, and impose his strength and will on him. And then he'll let him know about it after the play.
Huh. So he's the next guy to get into an argument with with Steve Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
He'll be asking Steve how his Achilles is.
Right. So here's a nice opportunity looking at some versatility with him off the ball. Kind of a delay.
Yeah, and it looks like, in this point, he read it as kind of an opportunity you think that was more of a delayed plan or more of him reading the back here?
Yeah, it looks like because once his eyes come back around and he sees that the back's still in, that's when he transitions into getting back up the field.
Yeah. Because it looks like he kind of green dogged once the back got blocked.
Yep. Once his eyes shift here and he sees clearly, because they're bringing other players too. So the back is committed to a player at this point. So he knows if he slips out, somebody's going to get there. Somebody's going to get home.
Yeah. What have you seen with him in coverage at this stage?
They have used him in flashes, working out inside of 5 yards, like in the slot. I think there was one time they brought him all the way out on the boundary, but they like to use him to disrupt routes within 5 yards. Not a whole lot of opportunities to watch him playing backwards.
Okay.
Third and 11. So we get a long down.
That was smooth.
Yes.
It was very smooth.
Yeah, he put a hurting on him on this play. And
Yeah.
that kind of goes back to torso mobility on an interior rush now, where you're looking at, can he rotate the shoulders? Again, diminish surface area, which he does. You can see the numbers clear as day on the screen here, and the hips are still pointed right up at the quarterback. So he's getting close to 90 degrees of shoulder rotation while still carrying the feet and the hips pointing forward.
Yeah, look at that. Little arm over and accelerates into his hit. I guess we'll get another view of it over here.
We'll get a nice close-up of it.
There it is.
And look how tight the arm over is. Sometimes if you see somebody try and pop off a swim like that, they'll get the arm way up and they're giving their rib cage up. He doesn't give that. The hand literally comes right over top of the crown of the helmet.
So, yeah, you want to keep that tight. There you go.
And just gets up and walks away. Whatever.
All right, so here we go.
You can see the acceleration here. Once he finds his lane, he really turns it on and is able to close that distance down very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he blows by that back the minute that back's turned away.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, it's over. Yeah, and
now,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask you what your opinion, like, some people will probably knock this play and say that he doesn't deserve a whole lot of credit because the back screws up the pass protection. Now, the back, because it sets inside, he's obviously responsible for an inside gap. And as he peels back across, he should have his face right now facing up with Correa. And instead, he just fails to identify it and overruns it for the pass rusher on the boundary. Where do you draw the line if you're interpreting film when you watch something like that? Like, where does blame be assigned somewhere and credit be given elsewhere?
Right. I mean, I think you can have a balanced point of view with this, which is, on the one hand, are you going to say he did anything amazing in terms of how to overcome an obstacle? Well, no, because there was no obstacle there for him to overcome in terms of a primary blocker. But he still has to show the speed and show the understanding of angles to sack the quarterback. You still have an obstacle in the fact that the quarterback, if he's a good quarterback in the pocket, is going to do some things that's going to make it a little bit more difficult for a blitzer up the middle. Now, if this is Jared Goff, Jared Goff is probably going to wait until Correa is about right here.
Right.
and then Goff is going to slip him either by reducing the shoulder or by spinning outside or by doing
Right.
something a little bit different. Vernon Adams would be an example of a guy who might wait until a step.
Yep.
Even Cody Kessler, who is not exactly known as one of the best quarterback prospects, but has a pretty quick 3-cone time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you look at him being able to slip people at 220. He's pretty good at slipping players too. So, to me, I look at quarterback and I think, okay, I look at it from the reverse angle. I go, okay, well, from a quarterback standpoint, I tend to value quarterbacks who either A, recognize the pressure very early and avoid it well before the defender gets there, or B, recognize the pressure very early and bait the defender until that
Right.
defender is within a step of them, because Andrew Luck's great at that. That's the one thing that he's very good at. Russell Wilson's very good at that. It's just like, yeah, come here as close as you can, and I'm going to be the bullfighter. And I'm just gonna slip my cape right over the top and step out of the way. And number 17 here doesn't give Correa that kind of an experience here. He tries a couple of steps early and he turns really his body into, it's like, just tackle me. He gives him his back. But I would say this. I would say that Correa gets enough credit that his angle is strong enough to be able to get a good solid wrap with one arm and then bringing the second arm over. And he shows burst to the player. So I would say it's a good play. I just probably wouldn't. I would probably say if I'm projecting against a top NFL quarterback, I'd say, you're still looking for him to maybe tighten the angle a little bit. That would be about it.
Sure.
But that's the fun of this. This is what's so much fun about trying to project players, is that you can, the more you do this, the more you look at multiple positions and their point of view and what they're trying to do, and then what you've seen at the top level and how they go about doing it, and it just becomes an ever intriguing process. And then the connections you make between different positions on opposite sides of the field.
Right. So at least here we get an opportunity to see a pass zone drop.
Yeah.
Which is something that we haven't seen. So I like the fact that his eyes come out, the hips open, and he's not afraid to put his back to the quarterback to hit his landmark.
Yeah.
That's something that, some players don't trust that. And they'll try and run where he takes his initial step, his hinge step. They'll try and ride that the whole way back. But if you're doing that, you don't know what's going on out in the space you're trying to cover. You don't know where the receivers are going. So it's just really hitting your landmarks, especially for outside linebackers who are working flats and hook curls at a very high amount of frequency. You got to know what's going on in your peripherals. So turn your head and trust your coaching, and trust your technique is, pretty important from my perspective. And it's nice to see a flash of it, even if it's just a limited rep, because we're not seeing it very frequently.
Right. So how do you feel about when you see a player take on a fullback or a tight end in this type of a case and they get handled? I mean, do you have, I know some people who are listening or watching might go, well, he's getting blocked by tight ends and fullbacks. Does that mean anything to you? How do you explain to people that may not be as bad of a thing as that sounds like? Or it's a concern.
Yeah, I like the mentality of, if you're a physical football player, which he is, and you have an opportunity to go against a skill guy, you take that opportunity, you try and go right through him. Don't get too cute with it. He puts a strong effort to try and go right through him, and you can see initial contact to the point where that fullback / tight end is able to anchor. It's about 3.5 yards.
Yeah,
he really creates a lot of push and collapse here. So if that ball's not out on schedule, so to say, that he has a reasonable opportunity to continue to collapse that and get a hand on the quarterback, just bull rushing him right back into the play.
Yeah, I mean he's basically getting ridden a rough road backwards on this.
So no, he doesn't win with, a hand strike, but at the same time, there's a certain level of will being imposed there, which you want to see. You want to see, the ability to handle skilled players physically, which is what he did.
Absolutely. Oh, definitely good stuff. So with that in mind, tell us a little bit about, I think that from this standpoint, with us about an hour into what we got, tell us about, what are other things that you've seen with Correa that maybe we didn't see in this particular viewing that have you excited about him, and where you see him being a good fit, and what are you hoping to see from him to help him develop into the type of player that you would project?
Sure. Well, just to kind of go back and touch on the comparison I made at the very beginning of Carl Bradford, I think this game was a really good snapshot of the things that if you scouted Bradford coming out of college, you should see some parallels as far as what he does well, physical player. Correa has a couple extra things going for him in the fact that he has much more natural length. He's a much longer player than Bradford was. Still plays with that relentless motor, that physicality. I think he's a little bit more refined than Bradford. So he has an opportunity to be a legitimate edge defender, whereas Bradford kind of had himself boxed in. Correa has stretches in games where he's quiet, but it's not necessarily because he's being asked to do things that take him away from the football on the line of scrimmage. So I think an opportunity in a defense where it's an attack style defense where he can come forward, attack the line of scrimmage with consistency and be more of a pressure player instead of being spaced out, spending a lot of time jamming receivers on the boundary and then having to play a hook curl coverage or something like that. He has that versatility, and it's nice to know you have that, but it's not what he does best. So I think a defense like, say, Todd Bowles in the New York Jets, who could really use, some perimeter pressure players. They're getting a little long in the tooth with what they have there. Something like that, where you already have a really athletic defensive front, and then you add somebody like this with that really physical, aggressive mentality, and is just a guy who's willing to physically go toe-to-toe with you and try his luck and try his hand. And then once he has you back on his heels, he has some subtleties in which he can pop off and force you to have a negative rep when he's challenging you physically. I think that would be a great fit for him. I really think, if he's there when New York picks early in the second round, that's a match made in heaven, in my opinion. So I think the more opportunities that you can get with him playing forward and playing aggressive, the better results you're going to get out of him.
Well, excellent stuff, Kyle. This was a fantastic session. I think a very informative one, looking at a player who you can get a chance to see some of his potential and where he is now, where he could go. And for anyone who's looking at really a nice tutorial on some of the important aspects of edge play, I think you covered it quite well. So absolutely, my pleasure. So, on behalf of Kyle, on behalf of myself, thanks again for tuning in. And you can find more of these videos at YouTube at the RSP Film Room. And you can catch Kyle at NDT Scouting. You can also catch his work at Draft Breakdown. And I think you can catch both of us. And I'm not going to explain why for the sake of due to what we're doing, but I'll say April 1st is probably a good day for both of us. And you should check it out on check it out on Draft Breakdown, because they've been kind enough to promote a lot of the work that we spend all year doing. So you guys take care. I definitely recommend you check out what Kyle does, and we will see you guys the next time around here in the RSP Foam Room. Thanks again.